Hello guys, today let's begin with the story of my simulated path to immortality. In the city of Zangjing of the Great Shen Nation, at the mansion of the Grand Preceptor, a grand birthday celebration was underway. The protagonist of this story, Li Fan, sat at the center of it all. Despite his advanced age, his imposing presence remained unchanged. Over the past 50 years, Li Fan had risen from nothing to the peak of power. Once a poor scholar who had transmigrated into this world with empty hands, he now stood as the Grand Preceptor, a figure whose authority overshadowed the entire nation. Looking back on his life, Li Fan felt satisfied. He had achieved everything a mortal could ever want. The top floor of the manor was filled with music, wine, and dancers. Guests laughed and drank freely, enjoying the rare moment of peace and celebration. Then, a subordinate suddenly rushed in, his face pale with fear. He reported that the sky was ablaze, filled with falling flames, an ominous yet seemingly divine phenomenon. Worse still, the flames appeared to be heading straight toward the city. Li Fan immediately stepped onto the balcony. What he saw shocked him to the core. The flames were not natural. Two figures were battling in the sky. Their presence alone distorted the heavens, as if the world itself could not withstand their power. One of them shouted a name, Dao Xuanzi, warning him not to push things too far. Below them, people fell to their knees in terror, worshipping these godlike beings. But unlike the others, Li Fan quickly realized the true danger. These beings did not even acknowledge the existence of mortals. In the sky, the dark-haired cultivator Dao Xuanzi confronted Kong Hong, a sturdy man with golden hair resembling a lion's mane. Dao Xuanzi demanded that Kong Hong hand over his core formation method, declaring that the fight would not end unless one of them died. Kong Hong scoffed. For nearly 100 years, he had been trapped at the Foundation establishment stage due to lacking a core formation method. His lifespan was nearing its limit, and this newly obtained method was his only hope. How could he possibly give it up? Dao Xuanzi agreed on one thing. The Golden Core Dao was a path walked alone. Countless cultivators were trapped at Foundation establishment, and with longevity within reach, there was no reason to show mercy. They had been brothers for 100 years. Now they were enemies. Knowing he was weaker, Kong Hong glanced down at the city below and questioned whether Dao Xuanzi could withstand the immortal mortal miasma created by so many mortals. Dao Xuanzi responded by raising his sword. A terrifying purple blade cut through the sky. Kong Hong countered by summoning a massive golden dragon. The two techniques collided. The heavens erupted. A deafening explosion engulfed Zangjing, flattening buildings and setting the city ablaze. When Li Fan regained consciousness, everything had changed. His mansion was reduced to rubble. His wife and children lay dead. Bodies filled the streets, and fire consumed what little remained. The once prosperous city had turned into a nightmare of blood and destruction. Less than 1 in 100 people had survived. Li Fan collapsed amid the ruins, laughter escaping his lips, not from joy, but from despair. So immortals truly existed. From that day onward, Li Fan became obsessed with the immortal path. Using the power of the empire, he searched the entire world, from the frozen seas in the north to the great ocean in the south, from the ruinous abyss in the east to the linked mountains in the west. He found nothing. Decades passed. Old and exhausted, Li Fan began to doubt whether those cultivators had ever been real, until he activated his unique treasure, Hanjin. Countless glowing texts appeared before him. When the true becomes false, the false becomes true. Hanjin completed its charge and asked whether he wished to return to the initial anchor point, the moment he first transmigrated into this world. This was already Li Fan's second life. In his first life, he had lived an ordinary existence. It was only after awakening Hanjin that he achieved his unstoppable rise. But this life was not over yet. After stabilizing the ruined city and confirming that there was no trace of the cultivators, Li Fan finally made his decision. Blue light enveloped him as time began to reverse. Scenes from his life flashed before his eyes. Two names remained firmly etched in his mind: Dao Xuanzi, Kong Hong. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 2, Lin fell into the swirling portal without hesitation, his heart filled with a single determination to hunt down the two immortals in his next life. By this point, riches, power, and honor had long lost their meaning. They were nothing more than fleeting clouds drifting across the sky of his existence. Soon after, the system activated once again, regressing Lin back to the anchor point of his life. In the first year, overwhelmed by joy at being reborn, Lin behaved strangely. His odd actions nearly caused his aunt to force him to drink exorcism water prepared by the village witch. Half a year later, he participated in the provincial examination. Though he placed only in the lower 30s, he still succeeded in becoming a Joren, finally bringing honor to his ancestors. In his second year, Lin passed the metropolitan examination. During the palace exam, he performed exceptionally well, earning second rank and receiving the title of Jinhur. Through careful maneuvering in Shenjing, he secured the position of county magistrate of Jiangnan County. By his third year, Lin began cultivating a trusted inner circle. At the same time, he secretly produced a batch of explosives and matchlock rifles. In the fifth year, refugees rebelled against Prince Lange's manor. Lin led troops to suppress the chaos, rescuing Prince Lange's family. The prince became deeply grateful to him. In the sixth year, Lin was promoted to prefect of Jianghai Prefecture and married the daughter of the vice minister of rights. In the seventh year, his wife bore him a son. By the 10th year, Princess Langia also gave birth to a son. Lin personally visited to offer his congratulations, presenting a carefully prepared gift. In the 15th year, the emperor passed away. Prince Langia ascended the throne and changed the era name to Shenjing. Emperor Shenjing summoned Lin to the capital, promoted him to Vice Minister of War, and ordered him to suppress rebellions across the land. By the 18th year, Lin had wiped out the rebel forces. The emperor reclaimed his military authority, but promoted him again, this time to Minister of War and Grand Tutor to the Crown Prince. In the 20th year, the empress was suddenly implicated in a witchcraft scandal. Enraged, Emperor Shenjing confined her to the Cold Palace. The Crown Prince secretly sought Lin's help, and Lin agreed without hesitation. Through private investigation, he uncovered the truth and cleared the empress's name. Yet, despite this, the emperor refused to release her. In the 25th year, Lin received secret news. Someone had reported him for privately visiting the empress. That same year, the emperor was assassinated during a journey. The officials retrieved the empress from the Cold Palace, and the Crown Prince ascended the throne under the era name Kongning. In the 26th year, Lin was further ennobled as Grand Tutor and appointed Grand Scholar of the Deliberative Council, reaching the pinnacle of mortal authority. Using this position, he eliminated dissent and built his own faction within the imperial court. By his 30th year, the world knew only of the Grand Tutor, not the emperor. In the 31st year, the Empress Dowager became pregnant and bore a son. In the 38th year, Emperor Kongning died of depression. In the 40th year, the Empress Dowager passed away from illness. In the 45th year, Lin's wife died. In the 46th year, his eldest son succumbed to illness. Then, in the 50th year, the nightmare returned. Two immortals descended from the ruinous abyss, destroying the city of Shenjing. Lin barely escaped with his life. The simulation ended. The system presented four choices. First, retain an item from the simulation. Second, retain his cultivation realm. Third, inherit the memories of someone closely connected to him. Fourth, abandon all of the above to accelerate the charging progress. Lin pondered deeply. Was everything he experienced real, or merely an illusion so vivid that truth and falsehood no longer mattered? In the end, he set aside these thoughts and focused on survival. Stability was paramount. He chose the fourth option, accelerating Hanjin's charging progress. Across 3 lives, Lin had lived a total of 166 years. His mental age limit had also increased beyond 1,000 years. Though time eroded the soul, this would no longer be a problem once he stepped onto the path of cultivation. His goal in the next life was clear: learn the secrets of cultivation from the two immortals. In 50 years, they would descend once again. This time, he would be ready. Unable to wait idly, Lin sent people deep into the ruinous abyss to investigate. For the first time in countless years, his life had purpose again. The appearance of the immortals revealed a vast and alluring world beyond mortality. Lin longed to cultivate. In his next life, everything proceeded smoothly. He once again participated in the imperial examinations, this time achieving first place in all 3, shaking the entire world with his fame. He still chose to govern a single county, healing it swiftly through experience and foresight. Secretly, he replaced Prince Langia with a body double and seized control from the shadows. Years later, even Princess Langia's child was secretly his. Step by step, Lin manipulated fate itself. In the 35th anchor year, reports confirmed the truth. The ruinous abyss concealed an inverted world of mountains, cities, and even a city in the sky. The immortals had indeed come from there, yet no method could withstand the terrifying astral winds guarding the abyss. And so, Lin waited. Finally, the 50th anchor year arrived. On a moonlit night, 2 overwhelming auras once again clashed in the heavens. As Kohong shouted Duan's name, fiery projectiles suddenly streaked toward them from below. For the first time, the immortals were attacked. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 3, below them, several armed soldiers moved with lawless coordination, firing their rifles relentlessly at the 2 cultivators. The sound of gunfire echoed like thunder across the city. Kohong casually raised his hand. In an instant, every bullet froze in midair. He stared at the suspended projectiles, confusion flashing across his face. What were these strange objects? Curiosity quickly replaced his surprise. With a flick of his fingers, flames surged forth, disarming one of the soldiers and pulling a peculiar metal weapon into his grasp. A rifle. Kohong examined it carefully, incredulous. The weapon relied on intricate mechanical structures instead of formations, and explosive force instead of spiritual energy. To think that after thousands of years, the mortals exiled to this land of immortal extinction had managed to create something so ingenious. He was amazed, yet also disappointed. Such a weapon could only function in a place where the great Tao was incomplete. Outside this land, it would be nothing more than useless scrap metal. But what truly angered him was the audacity of these insignificant mortals daring to attack immortals. The faint guilt he once felt vanished completely. With an intolerable expression, Kohong coldly questioned whether these mortals were simply seeking death. Without another word, he invoked his Tao art. Flame Dragon's roar. A massive fire dragon formed in the sky, its body blazing as it surged forward. It swept through the manor and across the city, leaving utter devastation in its wake. In mere moments, the city began to resemble the ruins Lin had witnessed in his previous life. Yet this time, something was wrong. Kohong froze in shock. The flame dragon dragon's roar was fundamentally something no mortal could withstand, yet almost all of Lefon's soldiers were still alive. At that moment, Dao Xuanzi noticed something alarming. The soldiers' weapons were soaked in mortal blood, and Kohong himself had been tainted by the immortal mortal miasma. His Dao arts were weakened. Only then did they realize the truth. They had walked straight into a carefully prepared ambush. This land was bizarre and dangerous. Dawanzi immediately suggested retreating, but before they could leave, a chilling voice echoed through the night, threatening that if they fled, the news of them obtaining a core formation method would spread throughout the entire cultivation world. The next moment, panic set in. Only the two of them knew about that secret. Who had leaked it? Before they could react, several cannonballs condensed with immortal mortal miasma were fired straight at them. Furious, Kohong roared and unleashed massive flames to intercept them. Dao Xuanzi sensed the danger and shouted for him to dodge, but it was already too late. Kohong's flames detonated the cannonballs instead, releasing vast clouds of immortal mortal miasma. The night sky above the ruined city turned blood red as the deadly substance rained down. Amid the wreckage, the two cultivators stood surrounded by dozens of armed soldiers. A soldier stepped forward, announcing that their grand tutor had ordered their lives to be spared if they surrendered. Dawanzi scoffed, but before he could retaliate, he saw Kohong's storage ring floating before him. Understanding dawned instantly. With horror in his eyes, Dawanzi turned to his brother, only to hear Kohong calmly urging him to take the ring and leave. The next moment, Kohong died. A massive golden dragon burst from his body, soaring into the night sky above the burning city. The dragon's spirit transformed into a floating tree branch as a declaration echoed through the heavens. The Foundation establishment cultivator Kohong, who cultivated for 205 years using the mystical object Cho Dragon Branch, had perished in the land of immortal extinction. Besieged by mortals and fatally injured by immortal mortal miasma, his cultivation was destroyed, his lifespan exhausted. His body perished, and his Dao returned to the heavens. A soldier spoke again, stating that the Grand Tutor had no intention of killing Dawanzi. If he ceased resisting, his life would be guaranteed. Nearby, Lefen watched everything with a cold, detached gaze. He vaguely heard a strange voice from the sky at the moment of Kohong's death, but it no longer mattered. Capturing both immortals in this life was clearly impossible. Even Li Fan had not expected the immortal mortal miasma to be this lethal. Dawanzi rose to his feet and calmly declared that he knew nothing of their identities or intentions. His brother had been plotted against, their Dao destroyed. This humiliation was unacceptable. The puppeteer hiding behind these mortals and daring to use immortal mortal miasma, a substance despised by all cultivators, had crossed a line. Rage burned in Dawanzi's eyes as he reminded everyone that they had already witnessed his brother's Dao foundation. Now he would show them his. Ascending into the sky, Dawanzi spread his hands and spoke with a chilling calm. With the wonders of heaven and earth, I build my Dao foundation, a sword named Daosin. The sky trembled. A colossal sword, as large as a mountain, descended from the heavens and crashed into what remained of Shenjing. Destruction became unavoidable. In that instant, Lin activated Hanjin's power and returned to the virtual simulation space. Clutching his chest, he felt the terror of a cultivator at the peak of Foundation establishment. Without immortal mortal miasma, even 100 reincarnations and endless schemes would not have been enough to threaten Dawanzi or Kohong. Lin finally understood their bond as brothers was real. In death, Kohong entrusted everything to Dawanzi, and Dawanzi, unable to accept his brother's end, chose mutual destruction. This only deepened Lin's curiosity about the cultivation world beyond. No matter how dangerous the path ahead was, he would not waver. In the 35th anchor year of his new life, Lin ventured into the endless ruinous abyss. As expected, the dense fog dispersed once every 15 years. When the fog erupted skyward like a reversed waterfall and finally cleared, Lin gazed through his telescope. What he saw changed. Ruins appeared, along with an inscription. The path to immortality is dead. Lin stood frozen, shocked and puzzled, wondering what had happened to the world of cultivation itself. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 4, soon, the scene shifts to Lin's 50th birthday. In the 15th anchor year, history repeats itself. Kohong once again roars furiously at Dawanzi, reciting the exact same words he had spoken in the previous lives. The echo of fate feels suffocating, but this time something is different. Below them, Lefon's soldiers raise their rifles, and they fire relentlessly. Yet their target is not both cultivators, only Kohong. The bullets tear through the air. Kohong reacts instantly, blocking them mid-flight, but his expression twists in confusion. What? His brows knit together. Why? Only me? Then realization strikes. The bullets are coated, immortal mortal miasma. Kohong's pupils shrink. He turns sharply toward Dawanzi, fury blazing in his eyes. So this is how it is, he roars. 100 years of brotherhood, and this is your answer? But Dawanzi is frozen. What are you talking about? His voice cracks, not with guilt, but shock. These mortals are not under my command. He looks down, then back at Kohong, panic rising. They're not mine, and that miasma. This is wrong. We need to leave now. Before either can move, a voice booms from below. Li Fan, Immortal Master Dawanzi, he shouts coldly. Why are you going back on your promise? Kohong's heart sinks. Lin's voice follows, calm, almost amused. As agreed, Lin says, you would help Dao Dawanzi eliminate Kohong and seize the core formation method. In return, I would lead my clan out of the immortal Forsaken Land. Silence. Dead silence. Kohong slowly turns. His voice trembles, not with fear but betrayal. Tell me, Dawanzi, he growls. Do you still insist on your innocence? Only the two of us knew about the core formation method. Dawanzi's patience snaps. Enough. His eyes harden. I will find the one pulling the strings. Lin keeps talking, deliberately fanning the flames. We have already angered the masses by using the immortal mortal miasma, Lefun adds. If you abandon us now, Immortal Master, my clan will die without even a burial place. The guilt-tripping disgusts Dawanzi. His killing intent erupts. He charges downward like a falling star. Shut your filthy mouth. Boom! The ground explodes as Dawanzi lands. Dust, rubble, shockwaves. His gaze locks onto a strange object nearby. A radio. An artifact? At the same time, Lefun shouts in feigned panic. He's trying to silence us forever. Dawanzi snarls, realizing too late how cautious his enemies are. He obliterates the device in one strike, but the damage is already done. Above, Kohong is shaking with rage. So it's true. His voice cracks. You betrayed me for greed. If you wanted the method, he screams, why not challenge me openly? Why resort to such filth? His aura erupts. I won't flee anymore. He points straight at Dawanzi. Come, if you have the ability, face me. Flame Dragon's wrath. A colossal dragon of fire erupts into the sky, roaring as it charges. Dawanzi exhales slowly. So this is how it ends. He raises his sword. Fire and steel collide. Boom! The night sky trembles. Then another broadcast echoes. Lin's voice again. I've changed my decision. Calm. Calculated. Dawanzi is fickle and vindictive. If he wins, none of us will survive. I hereby order my soldiers, assist Immortal Master Kohong. Kohong bursts into laughter. So this is the noble Dawanzi? He sneers. Abandoned by mortals, betrayed by fate. He who commits too many injustices destroys himself. Dawanzi finally loses control. You blind fool, he roars. But Kohong no longer listens. This is perfect, he declares. I've just mastered a new Dao technique. Imprisoning dragon. A flaming cage snaps shut around Dawanzi. Enraged, Dawanzi expands his sword. Crack! The prison shatters. Enough defense act. He raises his arms to the heavens. Witness my Dao foundation. The colossal sword Daosin descends from the sky. But Kohong answers. Then face mine. A golden dragon erupts. Dao dragon staff. Before they can clash, explosions. Immortal mortal miasma floods the battlefield. Lean soldiers strike. Dawanzi screams. His Dao foundation corrupted. The dragon branch within him grows uncontrollably. Roots tear through flesh. Branches pierce bone until nothing remains. A corpse. A voice echoes from the heavens. Foundation establishment cultivator Dawanzi, cultivated for 201 years. Dao foundation, rusted sword Daosin, perished. Lefun exhales sharply. The same voice. Again, he approaches Kohong. I greet Immortal Master, Lin says respectfully. Please spare the 1,000 lives of my clan. Kohong studies him. So it was you, the voice from all directions. Why would a mortal dare interfere in a battle of immortals? Lin bows deeply. Because if Dawanzi won, we were already dead. Kohong sighs. You mortals truly don't understand, he explains. Leaving this land is deadly, even for cultivators. Taking mortals along? Impossible. Lin freezes. So you didn't know either? Kohong nods casually. No. Desperation creeps into Lin's voice. What about our descendants? If they cultivate? Kohong laughs. There is no spiritual energy here. Mortals are soaked in miasma. They can see the Dao, but never touch it. The verdict is final. There is no way out. Lin stands, bows, and leaves. The door closes. Then immortal mortal miasma floods the shelter. Kohong screams. Realization hits. Outside, Lefun listens. Expression cold. If immortals and mortals cannot coexist, then how could I ever trust an immortal's words? And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 5, according to the intelligence obtained from Kohong, the land of immortal extinction was never meant to exist. It was an immortal forsaken land, born from a catastrophe that shook the ancient cultivation world thousands of years ago. Back then, an unknown plague appeared among mortals. At first, no cultivator cared. Why would they? Mortals were insignificant, fragile, disposable. But everything changed the moment the first cultivator became infected. The plague evolved. Its medium of transmission was none other than spiritual energy itself, the very lifeline cultivators depended on to survive. Like wildfire carried by the heavens and earth, it spread across the entire cultivation world. For those infected, a mild case meant their cultivation regressed, their realm collapsing. A severe case meant losing everything overnight, becoming no different from a mortal. Then their bodies would perish. Their Tao would vanish, returning to the heavens. Driven mad by fear and desperation, cultivators turned their fury toward the supposed source, the mortals. A large-scale slaughter began. Cities burned, blood flowed, entire bloodlines were erased, but it didn't work. The plague didn't disappear. Instead, freed from restraint, it spread even faster through the spiritual veins of heaven and earth, claiming even more cultivators. Waiting for death was never the cultivators' way. Some began researching ways to resist the plague. Others proposed a solution so cruel it would stain history forever. The Great Migration Plan. All mortals would be banished, exiled to lesser worlds, shattered grotto heavens devoid of spiritual energy. Formations would seal these worlds permanently. No return, no redemption. And thus, the immortal Forsaken Lands were born. Over time, even cultivators gave birth to mortal descendants. Within them lingered a shadow of the plague. That shadow became the line between immortals and mortals. It was named Immortal Mortal Miasma. After reading everything, Lean realized something terrifying. He didn't even know how many immortal Forsaken lands existed, and the number of cultivators willing to risk entering them was almost zero. To encounter 2 cultivators in one lifetime was already miraculous, but miracles meant nothing to a mortal with limited time. Lean was 70 years old. His biological lifespan ended at 86, 16 years. That was all he had left. A chilling thought seized him. Was he doomed to repeat mortal lives again and again, trapped forever within the cage of mortality? For a brief moment, despair almost swallowed him, but then, no. After waiting nearly 300 years, how could he give up now? Lean went to see the captured Kohong. How did mortals arrive here during the Great Migration? Kohong was genuinely stunned. You still haven't given up, so what if he escaped? At 70, he still wanted to cultivate immortality? Lean leaned closer, his voice calm but sharp. Your cultivation base is gone. Right now, you're no different from us. And if you return to the cultivation world, you might recover. He proposed a deal. Help him find a path back to the cultivation world, and he would take Kohong with him. Kohong sneered. Treacherous villain, trying to trick him again. But Lean didn't argue. Truth or lie, it's still hope. Are you willing to rot here and die? Silence. Then a helpless sigh. Kohong explained. In ancient times, mortals were transported using flying arcs and shuttles, transport-type Dharma artifacts. Back then, sex flourished. The world was prosperous, but a great calamity struck. Cultivators scattered. Those artifacts vanished. When Lean asked about the calamity, Kohong shook his head. The plague alone wasn't enough to destroy the cultivation world. The real reason, there can only be one golden core Tao. Methods could not be cultivated by more than one person. When too many practiced the same technique, cultivation efficiency collapsed. Masters turned on disciples. Brothers became enemies. The cultivation world drowned in blood. Lean remembered the endless abyss. Everything began to connect. So how did cultivators cultivate now? Kohong sighed. 2 paths. The Myriad Immortals Alliance, missions, contributions, incomplete methods, or the 5 Elders Council, loyalty contracts, and lifelong service. Methods weren't scarce, but all were incomplete. To advance, one must constantly switch techniques. Lean frowned. Wouldn't that waste everything? Kohong explained the supreme primordial true scripture fragment, a method allowing one to disperse cultivation without loss. Lean was shaken. It was too convenient, too perfect. Kohong sighed again. What choice do we have? Only then did he reveal the truth. Dawanzi didn't flee just for a core formation method. It was a true nascent soul method, a path that didn't need to be abandoned. Later, Kohong mentioned rumors, mortals secretly returning to the cultivation world, baseless gossip, or hope. Lean wouldn't let go. If there was even a sliver of possibility, he would pursue it. He promised Kohong everything. Freedom, return, all belongings, even the nascent soul true method. Kohong was stunned. After confirmation, he agreed. For 16 years, Lean searched. Ancient records, tombs, ruins, suppressing dissent, ignoring resentment, but time was merciless. 16 years later, nothing. Lean stood at the end of his life, his body fragile, like a candle in the wind. Before this life ended, he opened Kohong's storage ring, the Jade Cosmos Golden Chapter Scroll, a nascent soul method, 0 cultivators, a mountain of treasure, no way to use it. Then, something impossible happened. The Hanjin system reacted. Item detected, rusted sword din, status damaged. Classification rechargeable item. The system asked, proceed with recharge, and that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 6, the moment Lean chose yes, there was no turning back. The anchor charge began. 1 anchor point active. According to Hanjin's feedback, truth returning, once the charge reached 100%, a second anchor point would be unlocked. From that point onward, reality itself would become something that could be restarted, rewritten, and revisited. He would no longer be bound to a single beginning. If that second anchor truly existed, then time would finally stop being his enemy. The cultivation world was vast beyond imagination. Wondrous items were rare, but rarity meant nothing in a boundless world. As long as he could leave the immortal Forsaken land, mortality would no longer be his cage. Lean closed the storage ring. Aside from a few standard spirit stones, there was nothing else worth mentioning. With a faint reluctance, one that only someone who had lived too many lives could feel, he activated Hanjin and ended the simulation. Reality dissolved. The virtual simulation space welcomed him back in silence. The system presented the familiar 4 options. This time, his choice was different. He chose to retain an item. The contents of the storage ring unfolded before him. Lean sighed. He couldn't take everything. After a brief hesitation, he selected the nascent soul cultivation method. Then something went wrong, or perhaps something finally went right. The method bound itself directly to his system, permanent, unremovable, etched into truth, returning itself. Lean froze. Then slowly, a smile crept onto his face. Not joy, not relief, but calculation. This single change shattered countless limitations. In his previous life, ordering the excavation of ancient tombs had shaken the entire empire. Even with absolute authority, the resistance was immense. But next time, if he began earlier, if he shaped beliefs instead of forcing obedience, then even the world could be taught to dig its own grave for truth. Time moved on. Lean's 6th life began, and the world changed quietly. In the 5th anchor year, an ancient ancient seeking school appeared from nowhere. It brought ancient texts to the capital, texts so refined, so complete, that the court trembled. Change in virtue, southern flower, the Analects, the great learning, spread faster than arbor could. In the 6th anchor year, the emperor fell gravely ill. Physicians failed. At death's edge, the ancient seeking school presented an elixir. The emperor survived. Faith was born. In the 11th anchor year, a massive tomb robbing case surfaced. Over 100 were arrested. Prefect Li Fan dared not act alone and sent a memorial by 800 Lai Express. A month later, the decree arrived. Not death, enslavement. Sent to the capital. The machine was turning. In the 15th anchor year, the emperor fell ill again. This time he sought immortality. 100,000 troops were dispatched to excavate ancient tombs across the land. No pill was found. The emperor died with regret. But before death, he abdicated. And once more, Lin stood behind the throne. In the 23rd anchor year, fragments of a forgotten dynasty surfaced. The Qi dynasty. Lin issued a bounty. Whoever found its tomb would be ennobled. In the 25th anchor year, it was found. The tomb of the first emperor of Qi. When Lin entered the main burial chamber, even he fell silent. A ceiling of stars, mountains rising from seas of cloud, paths suspended in emptiness. This wasn't craftsmanship. This was defiance. At the highest peak stood a thatched hut, woven from golden threads. Inside, not an emperor, but an outer disciple, Aing, outer disciple of the Taihang sect, exiled, forgotten, buried as a nobody, yet entrusted with overseeing the Great Migration. Lin felt something cold crawl up his spine. If sects perished before the migration, then someone survived longer than history admitted. Excavations continued. Days later, bad news. A record mentioning flying ark. The attendant tomb had been robbed 1,000 years ago. Something snapped. Lin lost control. The table shattered. Hope, again, was just a reflection in water. He issued another bounty. Bigger. Desperate. Then, in the 35th anchor year, an immortal tomb was found, protected by an invisible barrier. Veterans couldn't touch it. Lin didn't hesitate. He ordered the use of immortal, mortal miasma. Buckets were poured. The barrier shattered. Inside, among the burial goods, an ark. A real one. A flying ark. Lin stood there staring at it, breathing slowly. For the first time in countless lifetimes, hope did not disappear. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 7, the moment Lin's eyes fell upon the object, his breath unconsciously stalled. It was small. Far too small. A plain wooden boat lay quietly before him, its surface worn smooth by time. No divine radiance. No overwhelming pressure. No awe-inspiring presence. Lin couldn't help but wonder, was this really the flying ark he had chased across centuries of reincarnation and despair? Doubt gnawed at him until his gaze shifted to the tomb wall. There, etched deep into stone by a trembling hand, were the final words of its owner. Words carved not for glory, but for resignation. Only then did the truth slowly unravel. The tomb's owner was named Shen Hong, a cultivator at the Foundation establishment stage. Over 3,000 years ago, he had been hunted relentlessly by powerful enemies. With nowhere left to flee, he crossed into the immortal Forsaken Land, mistaking exile for refuge. But the immortal Forsaken Land was a grave disguised as a sanctuary. Spiritual energy was non-existent. Spirit stones were scarce, and Shen Hong had brought too few. As the days passed, his reserves dwindled. His cultivation eroded bit by bit. Power, once firmly in his grasp, slipped away like sand through his fingers. Facing the slow certainty of death, Shen Hong clung to a desperate hypothesis that when mortals were once exiled here, remnants of the cultivation world might have followed, perhaps even a flying ark. Decades were spent searching. At last, he found the tomb of Aing. Hope bloomed, only to be crushed. The flying ark was real, but its core spell formation had already been destroyed. Worse still, Shen Hong lacked even the most basic knowledge of artifact refinement. The path forward ended there. That was the moment he gave up. Before death claimed him, Shen Hong carved his final message into the tomb wall. He left behind a simple offer to whoever arrived after him. Sweep my grave, and you may take one item from the cultivation world as payment. Protected by layers of spell formations, Shen Hong was certain only a cultivator could ever reach this place. And he was right. At that very moment, the Hanjin system's cold voice echoed within Lin's mind, announcing the discovery of a wondrous item of heaven and earth, a halting stellar fragment. Lin's heart surged, yet reality was cruel. The truth returning system showed no reaction. The fragment had already lost its divinity, likely damaged when Lin forcefully breached the tomb using vast quantities of immortal mortal miasma. What remained was nothing more than an ordinary stone. Lin exhaled slowly. Disappointment had long ceased to surprise him. Turning his attention elsewhere, he discovered two cultivation methods, a lesser truth returning vastness, Qi condensation method, and a cloud water record, foundation establishment method. Each already had one cultivator. Lin frowned. 3,000 years had passed. Anyone who once practiced them should have turned to dust. Then realization struck. Master copies. After the Great Calamity, countless techniques were preserved, recycled, and redistributed by dominant powers. These methods had likely passed through countless hands, abandoned again and again. Lin let out a bitter chuckle. Even cultivation rots with time. Then his hand stopped. The third item, the Taihang Arc. After thousands of years, after endless simulations, after lifetimes of failure, it was finally his. Damaged or not, Lin felt an overwhelming satisfaction ripple through his being. Shen Hong Hong couldn't repair it. Lin couldn't either, but he knew someone who could. Time shifted. The world turned once more. In Lin's 50th anchor year, fate replayed a familiar scene. Before Ko Hong and Dawanzi could finish their heated exchange, Lin interrupted calmly, asking whether a mere core formation method was truly worth dying for. The two cultivators turned sharply, astonished that a mortal dared speak so casually. Lin stepped forward and invited them down for a conversation. Reluctantly, they complied. With a faint smile, Lin spoke of an ancient prophecy passed down through his bloodline, foretelling that two cultivators would one day arrive from the east of the abyssal ruins, bringing with them the chance to escape the immortal Forsaken Land. Doubt surfaced. Curiosity followed. When Lin mentioned the Tian sect, shock rippled through them, a sect once famed for deduction beyond comprehension. Lin revealed the truth. His ancestor had belonged to it, not as a cultivator obsessed with power, but as a man consumed by calculation and foresight. When the great cataclysm struck, he chose to remain behind with his family, sacrificing freedom for blood. The reason Lin intervened was simple. These two were the ones foretold. Yet seeing them ready to slaughter each other over scraps disgusted him. When Lin revealed the existence of a cultivation method leading directly to the Golden Core realm, both cultivators were shaken to the core. But what he truly sought was not power. It was return. Return to the Taihang sect and the repair of the Taihang arc. The prophecy was clear. One master of swordsmanship, one master of artifact refinement. Together, they were the key. Dawanzi agreed. Ko Hong did not. Though he nodded outwardly, greed coiled tightly in his heart. When Dawanzi later confirmed the existence of the nascent soul method, Ko Hong's expression darkened completely. In silence, a vow formed. If persuasion failed, then force would suffice. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 8, the instant Ko Hong suggested seizing the cultivation method by force, Dawanzi's expression darkened. He refused, without hesitation. In a low voice, he reminded his companion of a truth Ko Hong seemed eager to forget. Lin was a mortal, yes, but he was a descendant of the Tian sect, and the art of deduction cultivated by that ancient sect was not something to be taken lightly. If they acted recklessly, there was no telling what unseen contingencies Lin had already prepared. More importantly, repairing the Taihang arc posed no real difficulty. There was no need to invite disaster for something that could be gained peacefully. Dawanzi also saw further than Ko Hong. If Lin were truly pushed to desperation, he might reveal the cultivation method's true nature, a nascent soul technique. Such a revelation would not bring fortune, but calamity. Once exposed, it would draw predators from every corner of the cultivation world. That risk was unacceptable. The matter was settled. The following day, Lin personally handed over the Taihang arc. Ko Hong examined it with reverence. The craftsmanship alone left him breathless. The refinement techniques, the interlocking spell formations, everything bore the unmistakable signature of the Taihang sect. Compared to this, everything Ko Hong had studied before felt crude and shallow. Repairing this artifact would not merely restore it, it would elevate his own understanding of artifact refinement. Lin gave them complete freedom. Whatever materials they required, he would supply. Cultivation knew no concept of time. What appeared to be a humble wooden vessel consumed nearly an entire year of their lives. When Lin finally received word that the repairs were complete, he rushed to them at once. Ko Hong explained carefully. The core power formation had been fully restored. The sizing formation, dust cleansing array, and auxiliary systems were operational once more. However, due to material constraints, the offensive and defensive formations could only be partially repaired. The arc could pierce the great immortal severing formation, but it would not withstand direct confrontation with a cultivator. Lin was unconcerned. That was enough. As long as he could leave this forsaken land and return with his ancestors' relic, the rest could be settled later. Ko Hong then described the arc's capabilities. It was fueled by spirit energy and controlled via divine sense. It could shift between three forms: compact, medium, and fully expanded. Even with limited spirit stones, the stored energy would be sufficient for Lin to depart using the second form. Smiling, Ko Hong asked whether Lin, being a mortal, required a pilot. Before the words finished leaving his mouth, the wooden boat transformed. In an instant, it reshaped itself into a miniature flying vessel. Ko Hong froze. His shock was undisguised. For a mortal to control a Taihang artifact without cultivation, such methods bordered on the absurd. Lin laughed softly. A trivial trick, he said lightly. He thanked them sincerely. After being trapped for over 1,000 years, hope had finally taken shape. Dawanzi then asked about the promised cultivation method. Lin merely smiled and gestured for them to follow. Everything had long been prepared. 3 days later, Ko Hong and Dawanzi came to bid farewell. Their spirit stones were nearly depleted. Remaining any longer would risk regression in their cultivation. Before departing, Ko Hong handed Lin a carefully drawn map depicting the terrain beyond the Great Immortal Severing Formation. With no jade slips available, he had used brush and paper instead. Lin accepted it solemnly. Moments later, the two cultivators vanished into streaks of light. As they traveled, Ko Hong sighed. Lin, he said, possessed rare character, a true figure among mortals. Yet his limit was near. Even if he returned to the cultivation world, his remaining lifespan would be short. Dawanzi responded quietly. Without longevity, he said, all achievements are illusions. They had once fought to the death for that very reason. When Ko Hong asked which method Lin had given him, Dawanzi smiled faintly. It was not the same one Kohong had received. Once he returned and entered closed-door cultivation, he would break through to Golden Core and fulfill the promises he had made. They disappeared deeper into the abyss. Aboard the Taihang Ark, Lin stood alone, gazing into the endless silver fog. 14 years remained before the mist would naturally disperse. By then, he would be 85, his great limit. Smiling faintly, he whispered that there was nothing left in this life worth clinging to. And so, he chose to test fate. The Taihang Ark plunged into the abyss. The silver fog thickened, space distorted. Suddenly, the vessel shook violently as if colliding with an invisible wall. Astral winds. Even a Foundation establishment cultivator would struggle to survive here. Wind blades screamed past the hull. Without the Ark's defensive formation, death would have been instantaneous. After a long half hour, the turbulence eased. Light emerged. He had broken through. Lin had escaped the Great Immortal Severing Formation. What followed was ascension upon ascension, core formation, enlightenment, immortality, divinity, realms stacked upon realms, power layered upon power, until he opened his eyes, back in his mortal body, seated within the Taihang Ark. It had been an illusion, the illusory light layer. The Ark had awakened him by navigating out on its own. Understanding dawned. Trusting the vessel, Lin allowed it to guide him, layer after layer past fire, ice, thunder, until the final region, the darkness layer. Then, a colossal presence emerged, a mouth vast enough to swallow worlds. Lin screamed, truth returning, activate Hanjin. The simulation ended. Though he failed at the final step, the gains from this life far exceeded expectation. Without hesitation, he retained the Taihang Ark. His seventh life began. This time, prepared. This time, resolute. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of Chapter 9, just then a dazzling golden light erupted from the abyssal ruins. Along with it came something profoundly unsettling. As the radiance faded, familiar words emerged once more. The path of immortality is dead. Lin snapped back to his senses. For a brief moment earlier, countless voices had whispered inside his mind, luring him deeper into the abyss. Had it not been for that golden light piercing through the Great Immortal Severing Formation, he would have already been torn apart. 15 years passed. In his 20th anchor year, truth returning finally completed its charge. With renewed confidence, Lin returned to the abyssal ruins once more. He piloted the Taihang Ark smoothly through layer after layer, reaching the thunderstorm layer without major incident. There, he stopped, hovering just above the darkness layer. Suddenly, a violent wind surged. A frenzied thunder weakened, distorted by an unfamiliar force. Specks of faint light emerged from the darkness, and Lin seized this fleeting opportunity to search for the lurking horror. Nothing. The light was fading. He hesitated no longer. The Taihang Ark shot downward at full speed. Then, the monstrous mouth opened again, vast beyond comprehension. This time, Lin was certain. The creature bore overwhelming malice toward mortals. Its purpose was simple, to devour anything human that dared approach the depths. Grinding his teeth, Lin veered upward at the last instant. He escaped death by a hair's breadth, retreating back into the thunderstorm layer. The behemoth halted at the boundary of darkness, unwilling or unable to pursue further. Bathed in lightning's glow, Lin finally saw it clearly. A colossal whale-like entity, so massive that the Taihang Ark was nothing more than a grain of dust before it, and yet it always found him, no matter how vast the darkness. Disheartened, Lin clenched his fists. Fortunately, time was something he had in abundance. Over the next 15 years, he challenged the darkness layer countless times. Each attempt failed faster than the last. The creature's response time shortened, its pursuit more precise. Retreat became inevitable. Then, in his 35th anchor year, Lin noticed something unusual. Only on the day the white mist receded did the whale's reaction slow, delayed as though restrained by something unseen. That was enough. This time, he would gamble everything. At maximum speed, he plunged downward, for longer than ever before. Below him, an illusory brilliance drew closer. Then, that terrible cry echoed once again. The mouth opened. Too late. The simulation ended. Back in the virtual space, Lin abandoned retention and accelerated charging. His psychological age no longer increased. He had reached its limit. 748 years remained. On his 8th lifetime, he returned to Shenhong's tomb and recharged the halting steel fragment. Anchor progress rose to 51%. Not enough, but not nothing. He failed again in his 20th year, and again in his 35th. At least his mastery of the Taihang Ark improved. By his 50th year, he stopped forcing the attempt. Old age dulled his reactions. Instead, he sought answers. Once more, he invited Kohong and Dawanzi under the pretext of a cultivation method. After wine loosened tongues, he revealed a painting of the behemoth. Their expressions changed. Dawanzi recalled ancient records, a long-lost beast-taming sect. Among their controlled horrors, the rift-splitting whale. No method to avoid it survived. Once again, Lin was alone. He ended his 8th life. In his 9th, he drifted. No control, no resistance. The whale did not appear. Confused, Lin allowed the Ark to drift all the way down until the exit was visible. Only then did the whale emerge. Realization struck like lightning. It could not perceive objects moving at constant velocity. Laughing wildly, Lin held course. The whale missed. The Taihang Ark tore through the rift between realms. Space twisted violently. Blood streamed from Lin's eyes, nose, and mouth, but he laughed. Then he saw it. Not one whale. Thousands. Rift-splitting whales carving darkness itself, surrounding the immortal forsaken land from beyond. The truth was far larger than escape. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality. At the beginning of chapter 10, soon, the Taihang arc burst forth from an abyssal ruin, eerily similar to the ruinous abyss of the immortal Forsaken Land. For a fleeting moment, it traversed the immortal plains. Inside the arc, Lin, already standing at death's threshold, smiled. A smile born not of relief but of fulfillment. He had finally entered the cultivation world. Even if it lasted only an instant, to witness it before dying meant that his ninth life had not been lived in vain. And so, without hesitation, he activated Hanjin, ending the simulation. Lafon was deeply satisfied. 9 lives, nearly 500 long years. At last, he had brushed against the threshold of cultivation. According to his original plan, he was supposed to accelerate the charging progress immediately. Yet, when the list of selectable retention items appeared, his thoughts wavered. The system offered him 4 new options. Then his eyes froze. Among them, the halting steel fragment. Shock rippled through him. After a brief moment of contemplation, Lin made his choice. He decided to retain the halting steel fragment, not for power, but to verify a bold conjecture that had long lingered in his heart. And with that decision, his 10th life began. Since he did not choose to accelerate charging, the Hanjin system would require 20 years to complete its charge. In the 3rd anchor year, Lin arrived outside Shenhong's tomb. This time, he did not use the immortal mortal miasma to force his way inside. Instead, he directly retrieved the halting steel fragment from the Hanjin system. The moment the fragment, brought from a previous life, manifested in the world, a wondrous phenomenon occurred. It began to slowly dissipate, like ice melting beneath a blazing sun. At the same time, the formation inside Shenhong's tomb, generated by its original fragment, visibly strengthened, just as Lin had anticipated. Mystical objects of heaven and earth possess absolute uniqueness. 2 identical mystical objects cannot coexist. Yet, through the power of the Hanjin system, he had forcibly created a duplicate. The consequence was inevitable. The 2 fragments resonated, merged, and ultimately became one. Only then did Lin command his subordinates to deploy the immortal mortal miasma spray and break into the tomb. The process was arduous. The formation's strength had clearly increased, and it took considerable time to wear it down. Once inside Shenhong's tomb, the halting steel fragment appeared largely unchanged, save for being slightly less damaged. Still, the Hanjin system could not absorb it. From the looks of it, the fragment would need further restoration before it could generate new energy for the system to draw upon. Lin stored this strengthened fragment within the Taihang arc, treating it as a vital asset for his future journey into the cultivation world during the 20th anchor year. As the Hanjin system neared full charge, Solifan acted without mercy. He launched a sweeping investigation, purging corrupt officials and powerful landlords alike, confiscating the gold, silver, and jewels their families had hoarded over generations. He understood clearly, even upon entering the cultivation world, he would still have to deal with mortals. And mortals required wealth. Gold, silver, valuables, these had to be prepared in advance. Food was also essential. Yet grain was the foundation of the nation, and his demands were immense. Memorials of opposition flooded the court. Solifan did not argue. Instead, before all civil and military officials, he expanded the Taihang arc to its maximum size, suspending it directly above the imperial palace. The moment the common people witnessed this immortal spectacle, they knelt and kowtowed in fear and reverence. The officials' attitudes changed instantly. They no longer resisted, only complied. With their proactive cooperation and the execution of profiteering merchants, the Taihang arc was eventually stuffed to the brim. Preparations were complete. Lin severed his final ties to the mortal world. Piloting the Taihang arc, he once again ascended into the skies above the ruinous abyss. He calmed his mind and allowed the arc to autopilot at a constant velocity. Only a few hours passed, yet to Lin it felt longer than the hundreds of years he had lived before. The tearing sensation of crossing between worlds surged through him. This time, however, he endured it, adapted to it. After a long wait, he finally passed through the immortal extinction great formation and arrived in the cultivation world. But the moment he saw his surroundings, confusion seized him. This place was entirely different. He could not find any corresponding sea on Kohong's map. For now, he set the question aside. Step by step, that was the only way forward. Concerned about the dwindling spirit stones powering the arc, Lin searched desperately for signs of civilization. He flew across the vast sea, choosing directions at random. 7 days, 7 nights, nothing. After more than 10 additional days, the Taihang arc's speed began to slow, its energy nearly exhausted. Just as despair crept in, a faint silhouette appeared on the distant horizon. A ship. Through his telescope, Lin fell silent. The ship was sinking. A massive hole gaped in its hull, 2/3 already submerged. Dozens of people struggled in the surrounding waters, crew and passengers alike. One passenger shouted, telling the others not to panic. He claimed he had already sent a signal to an immortal master who would soon arrive to save them. Lin's heart skipped. A plan formed instantly. He recalled the Taihang arc, leapt into the sea, and quietly swam toward them. Blending into the crowd, he pretended to be barely clinging to life. Soon, the immortal master arrived. Hovering above the sea, his figure blurred as though shrouded behind gauze. His face and clothes were impossible to discern. Lin joined the crowd, pleading to be saved. The noise became unbearable. With a thought, silence fell. Lin realized he could no longer make a sound. With a casual flick of a finger, the sinking sinking ship rose from the water, its shattered hull repairing itself in an instant. A wave of the Immortal's hand followed. Everyone, including Lean, was hurled back onto the deck. The Immortal Master then demanded to know who had sent the signal. A man named Such Chongyu stepped forward, bowing deeply and addressing himself as a lowly one. The Immortal Master asked if he understood the rules. Once they arrived, whatever happened would have nothing to do with him. He had never seen them. He knew none of them. Such Chongyu respectfully agreed. The Immortal Master said nothing more. With another wave of his hand, the ship shot forward at astonishing speed. Lean was awestruck. He could not discern the technique used, nor did the Hanjin system register anything. The Immortal Master stood silently at the bow. The ship sailed on. Half a day passed. After night fell, flickering lights appeared ahead. An island, prosperous and grand. Hundreds of ships filled its harbor, yet their vessel bypassed it entirely, circling to a desolate rear shore. Entering a narrow waterway, the ship slipped into a natural karst cave. After navigating the darkness, it finally stopped. Once stabilized, several burly men, dressed in black, boarded the ship. They ignored the Immortal Master completely. Forcing everyone to disembark, they led them into a vast hall and announced that they would rest there for the night. Food was plentiful. They could eat freely. Then the men left. Among the crowd, a young man cursed their misfortune, lamenting the sea monster attack that had killed more than half of them. Another complained that his father had insisted on sending him here to cultivate. How could cultivation compare to music and pleasure? He even boasted that he was the son of the Prince of Janan. What riches couldn't he enjoy back home? What good was this god-forsaken place? Such Chongyu interrupted them sharply. What was the point of complaining now? Every family present had paid an enormous price to send them here. If cultivation succeeded, not only could they gain longevity, but they might one day return home, freeing their families from mortal shackles. Only then did Lean fully understand. They were all like him, mortals exiled from lands of immortal extinction. The difference was, in their lands, the cultivation world was no secret. A mature smuggling route already existed. At that moment, someone clapped Lean on the shoulder. The sudden contact startled him. The burly man asked what official post Lean had held in Dali, remarking that his face was unfamiliar. Or perhaps he was a wealthy merchant from one of the provinces. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality.